So it's a weird series. Someone asked me, we had a block party yesterday in our cul-de-sac, and it was fun. Kids everywhere, and meeting new couples and families, and finding new couples that are believers, and it was just a really good night of hanging out and talking and getting to know each other and getting to know some new people. And in the process of that, we kind of hearing each other's stories. Someone leaked the information that I was a pastor, and I was trying to keep that down low the best I could. I dressed up as a pagan. I thought that would help, but that didn't. And so one of them says, well, what are you preaching on? What series? And I thought, that's a really good question. I said, I'm just trying to think through in my heart and my mind who we are as a church and where we're going and what is it that propels me? What is it that excites me in ministry and in people? And so I've called it, let me see, that's right, Trust, Love, and Be Jesus. And the first 2 weeks was the idea of trusting Jesus. That each of us are confronted with a relationship with Jesus, one that is not religious in nature. Actually, in some ways, it's the opposite. It's one that you come in and you humbly submit to God, and you say, Jesus, I know you died on the cross for my sins. I needed that, and I couldn't do anything for myself, and so I trust you and only you to rescue me from me. We talked about that for 2 weeks. One of the reasons why I think we fit so well in this church is that we care so much about people's eternity, not just what's happening in their lives today. And then the last week and this week, we're talking about how it is that we love God and love Jesus. In fact, that whole concept of loving Jesus looks so simple. And on one level, it is. But when you go to a passage and it says, love God with all your heart and all your soul, with all your mind, with all your might, you go, what all does that look like? What's that mean? And there's few things so universal, yet there are so few things that are so challenging than loving God with all of us and who we are. So we go to Mark, and Jesus is talking to a scribe. And by the way, a scribe is like what you would call a modern-day attorney. It would be someone and it was more like a religious attorney, if you would. One that was very meticulous as an attorney today would be, very detail-oriented and crossing every T and dotting every I. And one of those men who just spent his life writing documents and being very clear and concise and protecting the integrity of the scriptures, asked the question, what's the most important of all of the commandments? The truth is that there was a part of him that was probably a little snarky, kind of hoping that he would trip Jesus up, but he also knew that it was an honest question. It was one that probably needed to be asked. And Jesus in Mark chapter 12 and verse 29 says, the most important is, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with your heart and your soul and your mind and with all of your strength. And then he said, and this was free, he kind of says, oh, and by the way, the second one is love others like yourself. And that came from Deuteronomy chapter 6, from the Torah. So that wasn't new to them. In fact, oftentimes through the Gospels, you would notice and see how Jesus would speak, and he would go back to the Old Testament, constantly trying to draw lines from what they've known and what they believed and how they worshiped, and bringing it into the common time at the moment, and then for us to enjoy and understand and utilize as well. And so we talked about loving God with our hearts. In our hearts and our minds is where emotion lives, and we'll get into that in a minute. But as I was thinking about what the soul is, I found that the very thing that I'm supposed to be in the business of being a part of rescuing, I had a hard time putting my finger on it. It's like nailing Jell-O to the wall. It was almost impossible. And I struggled, and I came out of my study, and I looked at the staff, and I said, I don't know what to do. This is really confusing. And they said, well, you're the guy that's supposed to know. I go, I know. And then I started thinking, if I don't understand it, how am I going to teach it? This week, I wrestled and struggled with this message more than any other. And one of the things that I found happening is that the message or the content of it was seeping down into my mind and into my heart and into my soul. And as my spirit was communicating with God, I realized that some things were starting to come in alignment for me. I don't know if it was my video promo or my email promo, but one of them I said is, you can come, I'd love for you to come, and hopefully you'll benefit, but the person who's going to benefit the most is me. And I saw that coming all week long, and it's the truth. So what is soul? I know that I love soul food. What is soul food? It's food that you eat that it warms your very soul. It's that comfort food that when you eat it, you just feel loved and you feel like you're at home. It's Daratai. Amen. Soul music. What's soul music? We all love soul music. It's music that touches down deep into your soul. And it's the music that you kind of close your eyes and you just enjoy. And it fills you and it touches you and deep in your heart and your soul in ways that other music might not. What's a soul mate? It's someone that you have a relational connection with. And how many times, I've done 1 million weddings, and how many times I've heard someone say, oh, she's my soulmate. And I go, oh, that's nice. What number soulmate is this? Then he goes, this week or what? How many, The soul is hard to point out. The mind and the heart and the body, those are easy. We can point to those things. A few years back, a woman tried to sell her soul on eBay. When they say you can buy anything on eBay, apparently that's possible. Until one day that the attorneys of eBay made a new policy and they said no soul selling. So she was out like $5,000, which is a bummer for her. Some people talk about having a window into your soul. That is looking into someone's eyes and being able to see your soul. I think we've all had that happen. In his book, Soul Keeping, John Ortberg helps us understand this. And he talks in this way. He says, we all have an outer life. It's the life that we can show and we can see in others. You can see the things that each of us likes and loves and hates. You can see emotion, you can see feeling, you can see how we look and how we're dressed and how we talk. All of those things, we have an outer life. It's our profession, it's our intentions, it's our passions. It's made up of our will, our mind, and our body. But we also possess an inner life. And that makes up everything we are into one soul. Also, the problem is that it's invisible. The soul cannot be seen. You think you can, or you have a window in someone's soul, but you can't see it as a whole. In fact, oftentimes, our own souls are a mess, and we don't even know it. This past week, as I like to do, and you're welcome to at any time, you just let me know. My afternoons are often free. And I'd love for you to stop by and see me. And we had someone in the church stop by and wanted to see me, which I love. And so we sat in the front room and talked. And as I heard her passion and her love for people, talked about how she would write letters to a young man in prison who she, to my knowledge, never met, but later heard that he said his soul was dead and that her letters brought his soul alive. Just a few moments ago, I was walking through the room saying hi to some of you, and I got permission to say this as one of my friends here said, thank you for your email this week. Said, it just touched our daughter's soul as we sent that to her, and she even called and said, thank you for that. And it was able to touch her. I was sitting at my desk on Tuesday, and someone out of the blue sent me a picture. It was up on Daisy Mountain, I think, and it showed a picture of the mountain and the hills and the blue sky and the white, and I'm kind of looking at it going, I wish I was there. And he was there for his own soul, tending to his own soul, and he said, just thinking about you. Thanks for your message last week. I'm praying for you. And he touched my soul. Didn't know that. He just was thinking of me, and I thought, just thinking of me touched my soul, but to learn that you're thinking and praying, that's pretty cool. I asked for permission to use it, and he said no, so there you go. I have a diagram I want to throw up here to kind of give us an idea of what our heart and our soul and our mind is. Did that diagram make it up there? Is that up there? Do you see a diagram? No? Okay. No worries. Let me draw it in your mind right now. Our lives are made up of several things, particularly my inner life. It's not developed and cared for, then it'll be filled with discontent. And it's not unusual to point of constant complaining, even depression, when our inner lives are a mess. You ever meet somebody, or maybe yourself, do you ever find there's a discontent and you don't know why? Do you know the worst place to experience that is? You want to know? Vacation. It's the one time that you're sitting by the pool and you've got an ocean and you've got, it's like cue the dolphins, right? Boom, boom, and birds, and drinks with umbrellas and hot dogs that are this long. And it's the one time that life should be perfect. You've got your significant other there. You have no worries of work. You've taken your watch and you've thrown it away. The phone is gone. Yet, there's a disconnect. Something that's just not right. And it's at those times in my life that I realize more than ever that contentment and happiness is not what can happen on the outside. And I don't like that, because it tells me that I'm not in control of those things in my heart, not like I wish. Now, we're in control of some things, and we'll talk about that. The first thing I want to recognize is that each of us have a spirit. So think of it in quadrants. First is the top right. It's top right for me, top left for you, and that is the Spirit. Job chapter 32 says, but it is the Spirit in man, the breath of Almighty, that make him understand. Romans 8 says the Spirit himself bears witness with the Spirit that we are the children. So I hear so many people tell me, even last night, someone said, well, I really don't go to church, or I'm really not into a certain thing, but I'm spiritual. And I hear that, and I promise you that I try my best not to have a snarky look, but it just kind of goes, I go, what? We're all spiritual. We're all created with a spirit in us. Whether you know it, whether you believe there's an afterlife or not, we're all created with that. In fact, I had someone say to me just a couple days ago as I was planning a funeral with them, they said, I never, ever dreamt of an afterlife until now. And now I'm convinced. And I thought, isn't that interesting? That spirit that lives in you, that's deep in your heart, deep in your soul, that connection, that spirit that says that you can connect with God, it may be dormant. In fact, Romans says that it's dead until you come to Christ, but it still exists. And when I learn in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, that God created man, and get this, he breathed life into Adam. He did that with no one else. And so Adam and Eve have been given this gift of life, the very breath of God breathed into them. It's one of the places that we go as Christians. And every evangelical preacher that I know all points back to that in Genesis chapter 2. When you talk about when does life happen, whether it's at conception or if it's at birth, every evangelical Christian preacher that I know points to the fact that it's at conception. And that God breathes into that little teeny one a spirit that's connected with God. That's why in Romans chapter 1, where there's a passage there that talks about, well, what about those that are in, I've had this question given to me 1,000 times, and everyone thinks they're going to stump me, and I'm like, oh, please. That we learn that God has placed in each of us, every single human, whether they want to believe in God or not, there is a understanding of an existence of a loving God, and it's in their hearts. That's why missionaries show up to places where they've never heard the good news, and what happens is they go, we've been waiting for you. How many times have we read that? Because there's a spirit that communicates with God. By the way, your spirit, get this, it craves connection with God. A deep craving that nothing else can touch. It's the second thing, it's mind and heart. It's mentioned 1,000 times in the Bible. In ancient world, thoughts and feelings lived here. Matthew chapter 9 says, and Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, why are you thinking evil things in your heart? In other words, the heart becomes both the entrance and the exit of a being. And whatever enters in must enter through the heart, and whatever comes out must proceed from the heart. So when you and I think about who we are, there's a spirit that connects with God. But then you come over here, and now there's a mind and a heart that work together. And that mind and heart is where our passions and our interests and our love and our jealousy and our hate and our obsessions and our cravings, they all live here. Romans 12 says, therefore I urge you, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living, holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service. So we've got bodies, we've got mind, we've got mind and heart. They're working together, and that is where peace lives. Our minds, your mind, craves peace. You say, we've got 4 kids. I've been craving peace for 12 years now. I get it too. But I'm here to tell you, whether you got a bunch of kids running around, and I don't know what you do in your house, if they're running and going by ropes, and I do know this, that there's peace on the outside, but then there's also a craving of peace on the inside that gives us the ability to go, oh, it's okay. And then our body. When God created Adam and Eve, he provided them with physical bodies. And the fact that God formed the physical body first, then breathed breath of life into them, means that we are living bodies, not simply incarnated souls. Do you understand that? Do you understand how huge that is? I like to think of our bodies as a little kingdom. And somebody wrote, I don't know where I found this, I think it was Dallas Willard. He says, our bodies are like little power packs. I like that term. And we're all little power packs because we're filled with mind and heart and soul and spirit. And we've got this, we've got all of this energy, and we've got all this purpose, and we've got all this drive. And in our bodies, this is where all of that lives. And this is where it all comes out. Behaviors are outsourced to our bodies, and they are amazing, but far from the entire story. Otherwise, we would be robots. I'm much more than what my body is. But the consequences to sin in my body can be great. You ever find somebody, maybe you've been here, maybe you know it firsthand, that you've taken your body to places where it shouldn't have gone, or you've done things with your body that you shouldn't have done? And the sense of guilt was so great that it actually caused you to be physically ill. That's why sexual sin is so devastating to a soul. There are folks who actually believe that what they do with their bodies, even when no one's around, has no effect on their spirit and their heart or their connection with God or connection with people. And there's this disconnect. And it would be like owning a car, a nice car. And if you watched my video this week, I alluded to the fact that someone threw me the keys and let me drive their AMG E65. About 650 horsepower. Almost as much as my Honda, but it was a nice car, don't get me wrong. And so I remember going, and he said, step on it. And I said, really? And he goes, yeah, step on it. And the back end was just got all squirrely, and I got this look on my face like, I think I just went to heaven. And if I keep going at this space, I'm going to end up in heaven. And it's like taking that car, and there's a disconnect with the fuel that goes in, and you put diesel in instead of regular gas, and expecting it to run well, right? And expecting it to perform. And we take our bodies to places that, well, here's the beauty, is we take them to places that shouldn't, that we know there's going to be disconnect and disintegrated, but then we expect God's blessing. And we say, God, I'm going to do what I want to do, but I want you to bless me like I want you to bless me. So in no way am I suggesting that the body's not important. It is. It follows. By the way, let me just say this. I'm way behind, so I may as well throw this one in too. When I was growing up, the church, and I don't mean just my church, but it was very common in the college that I went to, the concern was very, very great on the body and the hair and the clothes. And would you believe that I actually wore blue jeans occasionally on weekends? That's how much of a pagan I was. No, truthfully, you couldn't go to places that if a Chili's had a bar, you weren't allowed into the Chili's because someone might think that you're going into the bar. Couldn't go to a movie because a G movie because people might think that you're going to another movie. And so there was this obsession with our bodies. Now, by the way, not all of that was bad. It kept me from a lot of things. So I'm not here to complain. I'm just telling you there was this obsession. To the point in my heart, maybe no one else, maybe it was just me, but I thought if I was doing all of the right things, then that there was going to be a connection with God. And God says, it's just your little power pack. It's just your body. It is your kingdom, it is your body, but throughout the New Testament we care about what's going on inside, which leads me to number 4, the soul. The soul is the integration of all of them into one eternal life. The soul runs your life. It's like a CPU if you're a nerd. Not circumstances, not thoughts or even feelings. Your soul is the life center of a human. You ever watch someone who seemingly has it all, lose it all over a bad decision or a series of? And nothing looked logical? You ever see that? We've watched it in Hollywood, right? I mean, all you got to do is turn on TMZ, one of my favorite Christian programs. And you find somebody who has it all. And their lives just go down the tubes. And it doesn't take long for the rest to start heaping coals on them, right? There's no love in Hollywood. What have you done for me lately? Proverbs 16 says, gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul, healing to the bone. I got to pick up next week because that was my intro. That's how pathetic I am. You know what I'm afraid of? This is what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that our concentration or our effort or our attention is given to care, being Jesus. And sometimes I'm concerned that we hit this one because we got to have a relationship with Jesus, but then sometimes I think we skip this middle one and we go right to the third one. And what I'm concerned about, and by the way, my concern is not for you, it's for me, is that we skip and we go and do good things. And we care for people. And we go, and we go, and we go until we are exhausted. And we're hoping that God witnesses this and sees it and says, oh, thank you so much for all the things that you do and the places that you go and the money that you give. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And all the while we forget or we skip. Or maybe we touched it for a moment and then we kept going. And we miss the most important, crucial part of being a follower of Jesus. You know what it is? It's receiving his love. I'm currently watching a marriage which was going down this way, and all of a sudden someone started hanging a left. And that left represents, it's happening currently, it represents seeking something to fill their soul. Because they came to the conclusion that their spouse wasn't enough. And shame on us, shame on me for not getting to them sooner to say, oh, they were never enough. They're never enough. And I believe with all my heart, with all of my soul, that this person is going to come and he's going to look and they are going to look and see Jesus and get filled and come back, and this couple who are a mess today aren't going to remain that way. And that they're going to get on the same page, and they're going, because of this love of Jesus, they're going to start heading the same direction, and then they can go and be Jesus for others. A couple weeks ago, I had this meeting with this pastor friend. I've not spent a lot of time with him, but we get to the heart of things very quickly, and he's just good like that. And just, he's become a dear friend and cares for me and loves this church. He's never been here. Just really a super amazing guy. In fact, I had a meeting with him a couple weeks ago. I came, and Judy and I were heading out in dinner, and I looked over while driving, and I said, I think I just had the most powerful lunch I've ever had in my life. And she looked and goes, what? I've never heard you say that. I go, I know. That's what I'm saying. Mutual friend was sitting at the restaurant way down in Peoria. It was odd that he walked in, he saw us talking, and saw that it was kind of intense. And in a moment of deep vulnerability, I'll tell you what it was. As I said, we keep hitting 220 people here. I said, so much you probably see a bruise on my head because we keep hitting that ceiling so hard and so often. I don't get it. And I said, it just hurts. And it's just, is it me? And is it us? And what do we need to do? And what do we need to do differently? And what do we need to stop doing? And he just saw in my eyes, talking about window into soul, he's just looking at me, and he was sitting there, and he was just talking and talking. And I was talking, he was listening, and finally I just stopped. And before I tell you the rest of the story, I just want to ask, have you ever been in a place where in your life you just thought, I just think I keep doing the right things? I mean, sometimes I feel like Job. And I'm not saying that for me. I'm just saying, I'm asking you, because I don't feel like Job at all. I probably never have in my life. But have you ever gotten to a point where you just kind of go, what more can I do? What more can I say? What can I stop doing? Give me the list, please, 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 somebody. I beg you. And I just finally stopped. And he looked me in my eyes. You know what he said? He goes, you've got the best friend in the world waiting to hear all about it. You can ask my family. I've cried maybe twice my whole life. What am I, 70 or something? I mean, it just doesn't happen. And just, my eyes kind of welled up. I knew what he meant. And he said, if it's okay, let me just preach a little bit. And I said, bring it. He goes, you don't need an amazing board member. You don't need an off-the-charts staff executive pastor. You don't need a counselor. You have someone who's walking every step. He knows every detail. And then he said, and he loves you. He goes, I know. We all know that here. And that seeped into my soul. It seeped in my soul in a way that it was like a sponge, and it just filled the sponge. I'm trying to translate it into your world. I don't know your situation, and so I can only translate so much. But do you know what? The Holy Spirit can. And rather than just accepting Jesus and jumping to number 3 and going and do, and let's go do so we can grow a church and grow more people, let's do this. Let's not get just simply more head knowledge and memorize more verses and study more and read more books. Why don't we just stop and rest and let Jesus' love seep into our souls? And some of you, it may mean stop doing some things. Except children's ministry. You need to keep doing that one. Some of you just need to stop. Some of you need to reevaluate. And some of you need to find a Sabbath. Some of you need to celebrate the Shabbat, which is an Old Testament process applicable today. And just let Jesus touch your soul. If you're dry, worse, if you're dead, I got the best news in the world for you. You have a friend in Jesus. Let me pray for you. God, I'm convinced that someone in this room needed to hear these words. God, I'm convinced that someone needs to allow you to come deep into their souls. And we try so miserably hard, and we fail even more miserably, to try in some way, some form or fashion, to fill our lives. But no one, nothing can touch us except the love of Jesus. And God, for that man or woman who needs to stop, God, I pray that today they'll stop. Others who need to be driven to their knees, God, I pray that they drive to their knees. God, may we understand and put into practice with our bodies and our minds and our hearts, through our spirit, the fact that you are the only one that can fill us. And no one looking around, your eyes are closed, your heads are bowed, and you're not looking, and this not make it any spiritual, it's just for the privacy of others. If you're opening your heart and your soul to Jesus' love right now, whether you're a believer or not, doesn't matter. But if you needed that, and you want him and need him to drench your heart, would you just lift your hand up right now where you... Yeah. God, there has to be 50 people that are saying, I need that. God, I know that feeling. Thank you for their honesty. It starts there with an honest mind. And God, in the busyness of their lives, I pray that you would just find time for them. Help them find that time to just sit and to reflect on Scripture and to understand the love that Jesus has for them. And let that love, propel them. Would you all stand right now? Before we sing this last song, just know that we love you, we care for you, and if we can be of some service to you, please tell us how. Got my friends over here, the Hazes. Rick's going to join them, Dana, in a minute under the sign. It's the place where you can go to always get prayer. Or stop me. I'd love to pray for you too if I can. God, thank you for letting us be together this morning. Thank you for feeding our souls. May we drench our minds with truth. May we understand completely the love that you have. God, may we then go further and let it seep deep into our hearts. We're not just correcting behavior, but God, that we're just falling in love with you. In Jesus' name, amen. Sing this last song as we go. Sing from your hearts, deep from your souls.